Hello, Ryan here, and welcome to Star Citizen Sunday. This is a weekly show which covers all of the news from the week just past. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you see, and let's get on with it. This week, we check out the latest progress on the new Lorville redo, see what new updates to Derelicts are coming with Alpha 3.19, plus hear more details on what persistent entity streaming means for the future of the persistent universe. So this week, we welcome back inside Star Citizen, and this week's show kicked off looking at updates coming to Derelict ships for Alpha 3.19. Now, the beauty of Derelict ships is how they provide this point of interest content for players to visit, but also tell a little story of their own. They are now looking to improve the speed at which they can create these derelict locations, as many of these larger locations require many developers to work on them, and they want to create hundreds of them all over the various planets and moons, so they know they will need a quicker system. Now already with the tools they use, they don't have to hand place all the terrain and plant life, as the tools do this for them, plus most of the modules are pre-assembled, so they also don't need to be hand placed, which allows them to spend much more time on the detailing, and this then means the ability to add more story to the crashes themselves, making them feel more appealing and believable for the player. Now right now they're adding age to their derelict ships, as we can see here with the 600i and MSR. You have a fresh crash, which is still on fire, might have some power still on the inside, then older wrecks where the environment is starting to take over, all the way up to a completely aged wreck, which might just consist of a rusty frame. Now this looks like they will be adding a variety of aged wrecks for ships going forwards to kind of diversify the range of what we see in the verse, but I also think that with all of the other tech and tools that they have in the works, like the biome accumulation, where plant life and whatnot can take over, where age and dirt tech, and the physical damage and breakability system, I wouldn't be surprised that eventually even player wrecks that will fall to the planet, then leave an impact trail, and then over time start to age and take on the environment, be that sand or rust or plant life, and once something like that comes along, I don't think CIG will need to worry about the basic shipwrecks, and can then focus on the wreck settlements, as there should be plenty provided to salvagers from PvP or PvE, unless they can find a way for NPCs or players to make homes out of the player crash ships as well. That would be cool, but I don't know if that is possible. Now talking of settlements, they have been working to expand the wreck site settlement hubs, creating a library of hubs to make these locations into actual livable settlements, or camps, but also maintaining a story to why each ship may have crashed there, who lives around them, and just showing how the people who moved into these locations used parts of the ship that were there to create the home. Now these hubs can include basic living hubs to shelter from the sun, with cots to sleep in. There are bars, places to eat, even power hubs with solar panels on them, providing power to the settlement. But the beauty of these hubs is that they can be added to both new and old derelict ships, so maybe updating what we already have. Now the purpose is to have these assets available for multiple uses and environments, so they can just add them where they need them, while increasing the speed of development. And last year they say the goal was to complete the initial library of assets, with the next mandate being to create these shanty towns on many of these planets and moons to provide more opportunities for players. Now I personally love the look of these. I've been so excited to finally see locations grow into settlements, so they can provide locations for missions, or maybe even trading, and potentially even places to call home. I love the range of what we have right now, even with such a limited amount of assets that will certainly grow in styles, and one day having hundreds and even thousands of these locations just throughout the verse to really create a sense of life and population within the verse itself. Now next up we got to see a new update on the landing zone Lorville as it progresses in its redevelopment and expansion, which, as Jared puts it, is progressing so well that they might be able to bring it sooner than expected. Now since we last saw it at CitizenCon, the level of detail has grown for all elements, like the buildings, enhancing the believability of the location, like the industrial outskirts, adding to the whole overall scale, making the location look far more iconic. The materials are now much closer to final, and they are just adding more tints and colour variation to the location to give a better day-night cycle impression. The building's design, as you can expect with it being part of Hurston and the family of Hurston, are very brutalistic, but this new Lorville will have new pathways, trenches you can fly through, tunnels you can fly through, cranes flowing from the outskirts to the city centre. They're also adding more landing pads, especially to the rooftops for pickup missions, and then in the future building interiors, which apparently we will learn about on Inside Star Citizen in a couple of weeks. But the city is much bigger, especially with the new industrial areas that feel like they have a proper purpose now. It looks far more functional and looks like it is a working, living, breathing city. Now, due to this new scale, they did say that the transit time in the trams to get to the gates have been expanded. Now, if I remember correctly, it used to take a literal 5 minutes almost to get from the gate to the city centre, so expect that to take a little longer, but they did say that the view will be much nicer, a lot less repetitive, and feel like you are in a real city. So to finish with, they say the key to changing Lorville this way is to have a city built to scale with no blocked zones or flight zones, more landing locations, and obviously prepping for future updates like building interiors. And personally speaking, I am so looking forward to checking out this new Lorville that I hope it does come much sooner than expected, but also I can really see this place adopting things like roads eventually, obviously when they're ready. And from the shots that we've seen of Lorville and this new Lorville, it already feels far more like a Blade Runner city, and here's hoping that the available foot space will expand a lot as well. And I can just see us getting lost wandering around the city checking out all it has to offer. Anyway, that was Inside Star Citizen, a great episode talking about two areas of development that I am very excited to see come to fruition. But with that said, let us move on to Star Citizen Live. So Star Citizen Live was back this week, and this episode was talking all about Alpha 318. One of the turbulent team members in the Montreal studio was made Director of Development for Star Citizen, which he does say that the difficult release of 318 has been a great opportunity to see the breaking points with this process and where they can reinforce the processes, as he now has tons of ideas on how to fix many of these issues, which is very positive to hear, that as they continue rolling out these patches, they learn and make improvements to that process itself. So very happy that he is finding ways to make this better. Now on to the Q&A. First question being, what are the persistent entity streaming changes from a player's perspective, or how do they see it from a player's perspective? Now they say that the main changes is that we will see history to servers going forwards, instead of the world constantly getting cleaned up and refreshed. And from 318 onwards, when we the players join a server, these servers will have been lived in, so seeing remnants of times past like cargo lying around, ships to salvage after a battle, and so on. And funnily enough, when I'm streaming, I often get asked what 318 feature am I most excited about. And this was always my answer, seeing a history to a server so you can stumble upon a wreck to salvage, knowing that this was caused from some battle between players or PvE, and how over time we could be just flying around doing what we're doing, mining, salvaging, whatever, stumbling upon a wreck or cargo, or even items that players have dropped. It is going to be truly fascinating from this point on, just seeing a history evolve in a server. Now they also mentioned that persistent entity streaming is already changing the decisions players make. For example, a player zooming around a racetrack might notice as they approach a corner a ton of other derelict racing ships, and realise that perhaps they should slow it down just a little to make that turn that seems to catch many races out. Which actually reminds me about a stream I was doing on Friday, watching a couple of random players who were friends racing around the icebreaker track on Utopian P-72s while I just sat there in my Vulture waiting for that inevitable boom sound, and then heading out and talking to one of the friends trying to find where his friend crashed so that I could clean up the track. Now the developers also learned a lot based on what they were seeing players doing and what persistence can allow in general, and now they are finally getting all of the 318 eggs in order, as they put it, and they are beginning to look into what they can do to expand on the gameplay and systems and how to clean up the world. And for example, because things now just persist forever, items like a ship tracking device that players can place on a ship is now an option that requires no more tech to allow that to happen, as it's just simply a byproduct of persistent entity streaming. Now, I'm really excited to see what else can come of this, and not just what CIG can come up with for gameplay, but what we as the players can request. I'm sure over time there will be plenty of things that we would really like for certain gameplay elements, and if we rally together and put that to CIG, chances are they will make it. But having something like a tracking device could be a very exciting tool for bounty hunting or even assassinations. I can just imagine finding your target at a planetside outpost. They're at the local traders selling their loot. You go and place a tracker on their ship and then wait for them to take off, and then just follow them to a new location to make your move. Now, persistent entity streaming also allows players to place useful items in a location in prep for a mission, and I do think that logistics for big operations would benefit from this greatly. For example, you could find a huge mineral deposit in the middle of nowhere, and before your org makes their way there to kind of set up the operations and get mining, you could have haulers move lots of resources there, like food, water, fuel, mining equipment, just pre-planning before you even set foot into the mission. Something else that was mentioned was for ships, and instead of having ship interiors pre-baked in with a lived-in look, they did say they will have it completely cleaned out and allow us to make it look lived-in, which I believe he's referring to things like furniture here, as it was mentioned relatively recently that they do want players to fully customize their ships, rather than having pre-placed interior details. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes of that, and to what depth we can actually customize our ships in the future. And then to finish with, they also say that you might be heading somewhere to complete a mission, and when you get there you might stumble upon a ship, and all of its cargo is still there, and then you find yourself salvaging and looting instead of doing the original mission, as it's more lucrative or exciting. And this is again something that I've spoken about on stream, how the pre-made missions are not generally the exciting part of the PU. They are fun, of course, but it's what happens to you while you are en route, or on location, or maybe heading home. It's the gameplay that can come from just being in the verse, not necessarily the job at hand, and those random encounters that are the most memorable for me anyway. And this is all free content that is created by the players, not by the devs. Now, anyway, moving on to the next question, which is to do with cleanup. What is the plan for cleaning up servers and cleaning up debris and things that may be overpopulating a server? And they say that when areas become overpopulated, they have a system in place which is per location radius per item. So for example, weapons, cargo, armor, etc. How many of each of these items within a radius of say 5 meters, 10 meters, so on and so forth. And if that amount is then reaching the upper thresholds, they will begin to remove the oldest item every time a new item comes in. Now this is of course going to be balanced to be hierarchical based on the importance of each item, and will likely take quite a bit of time to figure out the best way of doing it and just adjust those numbers, but hopefully PES will allow for quite a vast amount before they need to do any cleanup. But they have also been discussing the various options they have for a density manager, and one possibility could be having bins that players can put things in that will completely delete that item from the world, or even janitors or player missions, having people going around cleaning up garbage and other items. They have also been discussing ideas of having missions after a big event like Xenothreat, requesting players to go and clean up the areas via salvage and whatnot. Now this will be quite a massive change, and I can imagine for Xenothreat itself, although I haven't had time to play any of it, but once that event finishes, in-game salvaging companies and local authorities might be putting out missions for players to go and help clean up, or obviously orgs arranging their own cleanup. All the while NPCs and even players can accept missions to protect the salvagers from pirates. It really does blow my mind the depth that persistent entity streaming will allow, and I can assure you that we have not even seen the potential of it yet, especially while it's on the PTU. Once it goes to live and the servers aren't being sort of refreshed every so often for a new patch, we are really going to see some impressive stuff. Next question, how are the servers themselves doing? Now, they are always trying to strive for stability all the time, and for 3.18 they have increased their stability again, but they do expect they will need a 3.18.x patch to work out some of the kinks. There are always server fixes and improvements rolling out with each patch, even with these 3.17 point patches, and they will continue to do so with 3.18 and beyond. Next question, what can you tell us about the changes to the character repair tool? Now this tool is not a character reset tool anymore, which would allow us to reset our entire game account, excluding real money bought items and ships. This is now the character repair tool, which is just to fix the character itself, like missing eyes, missing heads, rather than for other reasons. So this tool will no longer restore your game inventory and items, it's just for your character avatar, which also means the reset will be much quicker because it's having less to do. This change will allow for some ship bugs to come to light as well, as the reset button has been wrongfully used to fix issues with ships, which is no fault of the player, it is more getting these bugs fixed by the developers, which is certainly a good thing, as getting as many bugs fixed as possible is important, and for ships especially, even more important. Customer service can still do a full reset, but these are not to be used lightly, and this is also not a tool to reset subscriber items. The method of replacing those is still to be worked out, but there will be a method. So the next question, where is 318 Wave 2 PTU? Where's the next wave? Now when they go to another wave, they say there must be a gain to do so, and when they move to the next wave, this adds many more players to the system, and so they want to have all the changes that they want now on the infrastructure so that they can gather as much data as possible. Now during the Christmas break, they did let the servers and the shards just run wild, which revealed many issues, and this had a lot of impact, so they have been looking at these issues and have now devised solutions and have started implementing these solutions and want to ensure that they are in place before moving to Wave 2. They did say there are currently 2 of these issues that they're working to resolve, and both of them are pretty much done now, and they will roll this out to the PTU to see if it's worked, and this will then allow them to open to further waves. Now, they did say they're very close to rolling this out, not quite there yet, but this will provide a lot more resilience to the shards. Now, they did go into a lot more technical detail about what these issues are, so by all means do take a listen. It was around the 32-minute mark if you want to learn more. There is also a new insurance system coming, which is future-proofed, and will resolve those issues too, but for us, we won't really notice that. They did say that they do need Wave 2 testers though, so do bear in mind there will be a Wave 2, then it will likely be open PTU, and then it will be live. So it is still looking like it is a little way off, and not likely a January release, although I'm sure many of you expected that anyway. Now the next question, the extra time it's taking to get 318 out, has this allowed for more features? And they say yes, generally, if the original release was around September, when it got pushed to December, they were able to bring in more features, but since December, no more new features have really made it in. It is more just back-end stuff, bug fixing, stability and performance, and server improvements that makes it in, rather than actual features. Next question, are you happy with the salvaging in 318 and how it's coming along? And they say yes, they're very happy with the initial release of this new mechanic. It will of course continue to grow, and combining persistent entity streaming with salvaging is a massive win. Next question is to do with crafting with the Vulture. What is the plan here? And they just said it's more of a foundational crafting, which will be further built upon, but they didn't really elaborate more on that. The cargo refactor, soft death, has this changed the 318 experience? And they say yes, especially for piracy now being way more lucrative and viable. Plus, the ship's not just blowing up provides additional gameplay, like boarding and being able to protect yourself and survive after a death and hopefully get a rescue. Now, talking of piracy, service beacons have been used to trap people, so do take them on with caution, but they do want these beacons to have a rating system where you can basically rate each other for the services that you've provided. So in the future, someone trying to set up a beacon trap will likely have a crappy rating and you can just not accept it. Next question, what are these changes to armor and weapons? Now these are more changes, they say, to how they work with energy and ballistics, with ballistics passing through shields with some slight damage mitigation, and then the ballistics being used to shoot through armor. Now they do have some tuning to do, and this will continue to be balanced as time goes on, but the end goal for this whole system is physicalized damage, and making sure that armor feels like it should, and this is a bit of a step in that direction. But also do bear in mind, they did say that the AI ships now use ballistics, and they have done some accuracy tuning as well. So as long as the servers are working alright, do expect the AI to be somewhat more dangerous in 318. But again, like always, it'll likely need more balancing throughout the waves. Next question, what are the changes to Bedlog Out? Now basically they say the goal is to get it back to where it was, but to get this patch out the door, they needed to just strip it down a bit. So it's not final, it's more of a temporary thing, and it will change going forwards. Final question is, do we know how persistent entity streaming will affect dynamic events? And they say they know that Rex will persist after these events, and that will allow players to go and clean up this stuff, but other than that, they're looking forwards to finding out, and they will keep an eye on things and see what needs to be done. But for the Xenothread event, the Idris will persist, and all those little ships that get destroyed in the process, but the Starfarer wrecks themselves will be cleaned up. So there should be a lot left to discover, to salvage, but obviously not those Starfarers. Is there anything you can tell us about these new 3.18 features for this year? So not just 3.18, but where they plan to take it to this year. Now for cargo, the first thing they need is new cargo sizes, which is specific for ships like the Hull C, making sure that they put the appropriately sized cargo boxes on those ships. And then from there, it'll be looking at the smaller cargo boxes like the 1/8 SEU boxes fitting on the grids as well. Plus other modifiers like having volatile, timed or temperature controlled cargo. And this will open up to more mission types, like for example taking 40 SEU of frozen boxes or frozen content cargo from A to B, and you'll be needing to use your life support on board your ship to keep the cargo hold cold enough so that they don't defrost. So basically more missions, which we know they are looking to expand on that this year as well, so very excited to see that come along. For salvaging, it's simply looking at ship munching with the Reclaimer Claw, and then for racing, they want to add missions, making events from them, plus new tracks and so on, and they also want different tracks to work in different ways, for like Stanton tracks versus Pyro tracks, illegal racing versus legitimate racing, and how each of those feel, plus building rep and unlocking new tracks. 3.18 is on its way. Would you do it this way again? And they say absolutely, but in some cases they would do it differently. With 3.18, it is a slog, but it's bringing something very special, and it is a means to an end. They need to get this done to get to server meshing, so they are making sure that they do it right, but it will be worth it in the end, as this unlocks a whole new avenue of gameplay, and we will see 3.18 as a point in Star Citizen's development where it just kind of changed the game completely. But they are learning from their mistakes with 3.18 and will be putting those changes into future releases. So that was the 3.18 Star Citizen Live. For me, I am seeing a huge change with Alpha 3.18, and the way that I play, relying less on just finding missions to do stuff, although I do often start with missions and continue to use them, but finding myself just responding to what other players are doing, be that face to face, or just because they've done something in the past and I am now stumbling upon it. 3.18 to me is a big pinnacle point in Star Citizen's development, where players now, more than ever, create content for other players, and it is only going to grow from here as more mechanics, more professions make it in, and I am truly starting to see the beauty of all of this work coming to fruition, and I'm just excited to see where it goes with every patch from here on out. But that was Star Citizen Live. Let us move on. So also this week, we had a portfolio post titled Rise of the Red Festival, plus the Squadron 42 monthly report was reposted to the comlink, which I have covered in a dedicated video linked below, and also my Persistent Universe monthly report breakdown video is also linked below. Some great progress on all things Star Citizen. I highly suggest watching them. So that brings us to the end of the show. If you do enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Also, I am able to do this thanks to my very generous patrons and channel members. If you appreciate what I do and would like to help make it even better from as little as $1 a month, all of the links are provided below.